One of the most satisfying elements of playing Pokemon Go is flexing your collection. Having a whole bunch of Pokemon that most other players do not have is a great way for you to feel great about playing Pokemon Go. And that's precisely what I want to talk about in this video. I'm going to be going over several different kinds of Pokemon that are the biggest flexes for any Pokemon Go player. Hey, what's happening everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's get right into it. So today we're going to be talking about some of the biggest flexes in Pokemon Go, specifically around certain Pokemon that most of which you can't even get anymore. These are Pokemon that have been in the game for quite some time. Maybe some of them were only in the game for a very limited time. And for players who are lucky enough to have any of these Pokemon, they are going to be able to flex on other players with these Pokemon in their collection. Overall, I feel like for any Pokemon Go player, these are some of the Pokemon you should be going after when it comes to trades. And of course, if you're lucky enough to have one of these Pokemon, some of you may not even realize you have any of these Pokemon, yeah, they are definitely worth flexing and showing off to other players. And yeah, I think this is a pretty solid list. And let's just dive right into it. Starting off, let's talk about a shiny that I actually have in my collection, and I totally forgot I had it in my collection, but it's going to be shiny Kecleon. The reason why shiny Kecleon is considered a big flex is because Kecleon itself is extremely hard to come across. It's one of those Pokemon that is a bit of a gimmick. It will appear on certain Pokestops, and it is incredibly rare. And of course, if you were lucky enough to get the shiny version from the Go Tour event from a few years ago, then you have probably one of the rarest shinies in the game, because for anyone to even get a Kecleon encounter already takes a lot, and for that Pokemon to be a shiny, you have to be incredibly lucky. Of course, this is one of those shinies you could get even to this day. It's not a Pokemon that you no longer can get, but if you're lucky enough to get a shiny version, yeah, it's definitely worth flexing. Now, another Pokemon that is a huge flex is kind of along the same lines. It's going to be shiny female Salandit. Now, the reason why this is actually considered a big flex is because female Salandit is the version that can evolve, and to get a shiny version of that is incredibly difficult. For you to get the shiny female Salandit, you will have to hope that you get a shiny Salandit, and you have a 1 in 8 chance of it being a female. And if you are lucky enough, if all the stars align, it's going to be a shiny female Salandit, and that is something you could flex on other players. Most people that I know that actually has this Pokemon actually choose not to evolve it because they know they could get whatever trade they want with this one Pokemon. I've seen people trade for armored Mewtwo, for example. I've seen people use it to get location shiny legendaries. It's a really big flex, and if you're lucky enough to have one of them, you are one of the very few players who have this specific Pokemon. And then going along the same lines, we have the shiny Galarian legendary birds. These are of course Galarian Zapdos, Galarian Moltres, as well as Galarian Articuno. They only spawn from the daily adventure incense. And not too long ago, they also added the shiny versions of these Pokemon, and they are incredibly rare. Not everyone is going to have them, and if you're lucky enough to have them, you will probably want to use your Master Ball, although I do believe you do have an increased catch rate, but regardless. Yeah, these are definitely rare finds, and if you happen to have them in your collection, you're definitely going to be able to flex on other players. They're incredibly good, they're incredibly rare, and they're highly sought after. Alright, and the next Pokemon type that you could flex on other players with is going to be 100% IV mythicals. Mythicals are those rare kinds of Pokemon that you can only get 1 or 2 of them on your account because they're usually going to be tied to some sort of special research. And because of that, you're not always going to have a full collection of mythicals. I'm specifically talking about Pokemon like Mew, Jirachi, those kind of Pokemon. Of course, there are certain mythicals where you could just farm them up in abundance, like Darkrai and Genesect, and those are not the Pokemon I'm talking about. I'm specifically talking about the one-off mythicals like Mew. If you're lucky enough to get 100% IV of it through the end of the special research, yeah, you're going to be one of very few players to actually have it. And I'm not talking about 100% IVs you can get from golden bottle caps. Specifically, it's the pure versions of the hundo, where you just got it directly from the special research. Those are incredibly rare. Of course, it's going to be hard to actually check that, but there are definitely ways you could flex on other players. You could show it off at your raids, you could talk to other players, be like, hey, I have this 100% IV Mew that I got from the special research. It would be a huge flex, and definitely there are players out there who have them, and they definitely flex on other players with them. Alright, and the next thing is something that was more of a recent introduction, maybe something that was added to the game about 3 years ago, but these are going to be shiny legendaries with a location background. Why location backgrounds? Well, every location background Pokemon is going to have a super limited run. They're usually only going to be tied to in-person events like Pokemon Go Fest or Pokemon Go Tour. These are Pokemon you could only get for a particular weekend. For example, most recently we had Pokemon Go Fest in Copenhagen as well as Chicago and Tokyo, and they came with Mewtwo's with location backgrounds, as well as a couple of other legendaries. If you were lucky enough to get a shiny Mewtwo, for example, with a background, you're going to be one of the few players who would have access to it. Not a lot of players were even able to get these because they needed to have a in-person Go Fest ticket, and those were at a limited run. So on top of that, not a lot of players were farming up Mewtwo's during those weekends, so any shiny Mewtwo's with the location background in the market are going to be completely limited. There's not going to be an abundance of them, and any one that you have one of a very few number that exists in the world. So yeah, location background shinies, they're definitely extremely valuable. If you've been attending in-person events and you have a couple of them, congratulations, you have something you could flex on other players with. And then this brings me to another kind of Pokemon that is definitely worthy of using as a flex, but these are going to be shiny costume Pokemon that you can no longer obtain. There are some notable examples. For example, there's quite a few different kinds of Pikachu with certain hats. They're no longer attainable. Those are definitely worth flexing with. There's also plenty of other Pokemon that had a very limited run. For example, certain New Year's Pokemon for specific years. These are all Pokemon that players can no longer get aside from trading. So yeah, they can definitely be used to flex on other players. They could be used as to brag with. It's really going to come down to how lucky you were during those events. Now, another thing that you could use to flex on other players, and this is a little bit more general, it doesn't necessarily involve luck, but of course, level 50 shundos. Level 50 is of course the highest level that any Pokemon can achieve, and if you were to have a shiny as well as a perfect IV version of that Pokemon, it is definitely something you could flex with. I have a whole bunch of them in my collection. I tend to really favor towards shundos. Those are the kind of Pokemon that I'm always aiming to get, and the shundos that I have, I try to max them out so that they are worthy of using to flex on other players. It's definitely something that not a lot of players are able to achieve. Some players have been playing the game for almost the entire 10 years and they still don't even have one shundo. But if you happen to have a shundo, you should definitely try to max it out because that's definitely going to be something worthy of bragging. Alright, and of course, the biggest flex is going to be a combination of a bunch of entries that I talked about, but it's going to be a Shundo level 50 costume Pokemon you could no longer obtain. Yeah, that is a mouthful, but it is now possible thanks to golden bottle caps, and that's definitely something that will allow players to have basically the ultimate flex. For example, if you were to have, let's say, a Luffy hat Pikachu shiny that's level 50 and fully maxed out, you're not going to use it in raid battles, you're not going to use it in PvP, but it is definitely something you could use to brag. I mean, crazy how barely anyone would even have that, but yeah, that is definitely what I would consider to be the ultimate flex. And if you happen to have one, congratulations, you're going to be one of a very few number of players who will actually have something that not a lot of other players will be able to get. So yeah, there you go. These are the ultimate flexes. Of course, there's plenty of other things you could flex with. Shiny unknowns are definitely up there. A lot of people use shiny Pikachu Libre as a form of flexing and bragging, but those are things that, you know, as long as you're dedicated, you will eventually get. But yeah, these are the things that I thought of. as being kind of like the ultimate flexes when it comes to a Pokemon Go player. But yeah, let me know your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. What is your ultimate flex? What is a Pokemon in your collection that you consider to be something that not a lot of other players will have? Definitely share what that is. I'm very curious to know, and let's have a great discussion. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. If you really enjoyed it and you want to support my channel, best way you could do that is hitting the like button for this video, and also make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already, and turn on that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload videos. Also, go and check out the links in the description below. One of them is to my Patreon page, and if you want to play Pokemon Go with me, you could do that by joining my Patreon, because I add all my Patreon members. So if that's something that interests you, make sure you go and check it out. And yeah, that's going to be it. That's going to be it for this video. I'm Count Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself today, and I'll catch you in the next video.